Hi, my name is Brooke Gentry, and I was tasked with reading Chapter 5, Racial Identity in Adulthood, from our book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Alone in the Cafeteria? So, the beginning of this chapter starts with Tatum describing their middle school and high school experience. So, it starts off with this quote. When I was in high school, I did not sit in the black table in the cafeteria because there were not enough black kids in my high school to fill one. I think this is a really important thing to keep in mind throughout the chapter because it has so much to do with identity based on who we are able to see around us. And it's also really interesting because that is the kind of school that I grew up in. I did not have a person of color in a school that I went to until 6th grade when I moved to Vermont from Michigan. So, this whole idea of trying to find yourself, when we look at Erickson's theory of development, adolescence is a very self-focused time. We are all trying to find ourselves. This is a phase that, according to Erickson, and what Tatum is trying to convey, we as college students are still in. We're not done yet, y'all. Most of us are still in the oven. The really interesting part is when we consider how different this experience must be if you're black or any other marginalized group, for that matter. In my life, I've faced some solid challenges that have greatly affected my sense of self, but I've never had to question where I fit in based on the color of my skin. Being a middle schooler and a high schooler sucks. The judgments, the hormones. Your brain is trying so hard to do so much growing in such a short amount of time, but what helps us get us through, and a major reason that I believe that middle schools are in separate buildings, is having peers that we can look at that are going through the same exact thing. We have mirrors that we can look at and say, this weird stuff is happening to you. Now, Tatum didn't have this. And he said that this is a major reason why they chose to go to a college with a diverse population. He describes being excited to find out that there is more to Africa than Tarzan movies and that there's more to Black history than victimization. And that was from page 166. Reading this quote made me do a double take and reflect on the history classes that I've been a part of. I guess I had this bias that I didn't realize that because I'm from the North, I had a good history experience. But it's the fact that the only Black history that we were taught was slavery and, if you were lucky, the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. Both are extremely important to learn about, but both are based in Black victimization. Reading this section really challenged me to think of what it means to be Black and only hearing about the times when your race was brutalized, while at the same time hearing about white American exceptionalism surrounding colonialism and trade, which is super problematic. But not having those mirrors to look to. And the next part of this chapter is about Tatum's college experience. They describe their college experience as being very positive, but reflects on how the story is not the norm. He adds in a story about a Black woman who started at a predominantly white college, then transferred to Howard University, a historically Black university. Originally, she was roomed with 2 white women, and while at first everything seemed to be fine, she described them starting to put locks on their drawers and their bureaus, and they accused her of stealing their beer. The administration then moved her into a room with another Black woman, which they first discouraged due to trying to make sure Black students didn't separate themselves. But this is what she had to say on page 169. She says that all of a sudden we started getting racial slurs like South Africa will strike, Africans go home, and all this other stuff. I knew the girls who were doing it. They lived all the way down the hall, and I don't understand why they were doing it. We didn't do anything to them, but when we confronted them, they acted like they didn't know anything. And my friends, their rooms were getting trashed. One day I was asleep and somebody was trying to jiggle the lock trying to get in. And I opened the door and I chased this girl down the hallway. The story sucks, but the most heartbreaking part of it for me is what she said happened next. The administration tried everything that they could, and according to this woman, behaved and punished exactly as they should have. Yet she still transferred. And why was that? She was so torn down and emotionally tired from the constant stream of microaggressions. In fact, evidence suggests that black students at historically black colleges and universities achieve higher academic performance, enjoy greater social involvement, and achieve higher occupational goals. Spelman College, an HBCU for women, sends more black women on to earn PhDs in the sciences than any other undergraduate institution. That is in total, not percentage. I looked up the study and I found the data. As you can see, 10 out of the top 11 places where black students get their PhDs in are HBCUs. Looking at the general table for all PhD students, it is very different. I'm not a math major. I am an English major. I know how to read words and talk about reading those words. Feel free to correct me if I am misinterpreting these tables, please. But I will believe Dr. Tatum when he says that it is not a good look. Black students are quantifiably affected by the social culture and the inclusivity of the institutions they attend. The last part of this chapter focused on adulthood, and an important reminder that we get at the very beginning of this chapter is that college is not the end-all, be-all for personal development. It's important to think about how race affects young adults, not just in an academic setting, which is hard for all of us because we're all educators in college. But especially right now, and this is just coming from my point of view, I graduated high school 2.5 years ago. I'm getting old. The trades are becoming more and more popular with the rising cost of education because it is just getting more and more expensive and more inaccessible. Tatum cites the Autobiography of Malcolm X as an answer to how black people can identify and have that identity be developed outside of school walls. For a little bit more context, this passage describes when Malcolm X was in prison, and this would have been in the 1950s, and encountered the teachings of Mr. Muhammad, or Wallace Fard Muhammad, who was the leader of the Nation of Islam, a Detroit-founded African-American new religious movement. I am altering a couple of words, which I just don't feel comfortable saying. The teachings of Mr. Muhammad stressed how history had been whitened. When white men had written history books, the black man had simply been left out. I never forgotten when my class, me and all of those whites, had studied 7th grade United States history back in Mason. The history of the black man had been covered in one paragraph. In my own case, once I heard of the glorious history of the black man, I took special pains to hunt in the library for books that would inform me on the details about black history. The reason that it has such an impact on black youth is that it offers another expanded, positive definition of what it means to be black. That's from page 172. This ache for community is exemplified when in 1992, the Nation of Islam organized the Million Man March. A first-hand witness said, "As I stood out at the Million Man March, I felt the powerful waves of history wash over me. There's no denying that this march connected many of the men to a sense of racial solidarity that has largely been absent since the 60s. This need of community, a need of seeing a familiar face, of a need of having someone there who can relate to you, that Tatum experienced in middle school and in high school, and it seems to repeat itself over and over and over again. So what do? Those of us who plan to stay in this area and will likely be teaching in predominantly white classrooms, how do we support the students who walk through our doors, who are black or Hispanic or LGBTQ or Native American? What is our job there so that our students are able to grow up being able to see people who look like them so that they know that they're not alone, and to help develop that sense of identity? According to Tatum, that's a solid question, and unfortunately they do not provide a simple answer. Because the answer isn't simple. They talk about how in corporate America, something I have zero relatability with, my family has been blue-collar tradespeople and morticians forever, that the inclusion of affinity groups, where there is space for people in underrepresented groups, people with disabilities, women, people of color, providing those affinity groups so that they can talk and voice concerns in an environment where they feel comfortable. One Black woman, who is a teacher, describes this as being really helpful, and that it has given her the tools and confidence to speak up about racial issues to her admin team and to her mentors. The knowledge that we can gain from this chapter is just how important community and sense of self is. Even if it's not in your microsystem, finding those people who understand you is vital to developing a sense of self. I work as a director for a local theater company based in Vermont, and this year we had our camp all online. It was insanely stressful, and we had about 20 students, aged 12 through 25, most from Vermont, but we work with a theater company in India, so there was a bunch of people from Mumbai, and so we were all working on one play, and I had very little hopes for what it could be. I thought it was just something that we would get through, but by the end of it, everyone was crying because we had to say goodbye to each other. And that really taught me this lesson of where there is a need for community, and I think that's especially important right now with what we're dealing with the pandemic. Where there is a need for a community, human beings will figure it out, and they will find that community. Humans are resilient, and our drive for community is stopped by nothing. But we as educators need to make sure that we are providing our students with that opportunity to find this community and sense of self and sense of identity, especially as Tatum was talking about, being a young Black man in a middle school.